welcome everyone. It is the 15th of September. A ton of information to get through today. We will run for about 30 to 40 minutes. So settle in, get ready to ask all of your questions. Very, very excited to be running through with everything for you today. So before we get into it, I want to set the scene and I want to ask you a question. What is more important? Is it information or knowledge? So those of you that have attended a lot will know the answer here, but just think about it. Is it that information or knowledge? What do you believe is more important? All right, hopefully you've all written it down, put your finger on it. The answer is knowledge. So, there is a right and wrong answer, and today is all about taking that information and turning it into knowledge. So the structure of today's session will very much follow through this path, and that is what question time is all about. So, I've struggled with this concept myself, and that's why I think it's really, really important for you to understand the difference between information and knowledge. So, I've done it before. 15 odd years ago, I used to constantly get confused with the ton of information that was coming through. So, I'll give you an example. I used to read the Financial Review every morning and think, fantastic, I know everything. And I was at a conference and I was lucky enough to have my hand up to answer a question. And I proceeded to go on and on and on and on and on about all that information that I had stored in my brain, photographically memorized it and went out. And after about 5 minutes, the speaker said, I'm going to stop you there. And I'm thinking, why? Crowd was loving it. And he said to me, but what does that mean? What do you think that means? And suffice to say, I had no idea. I was embarrassed. I went red and everyone laughed. And this was in front of a crowd of about 600 or 700 people. I've never been so embarrassed before in my life. But it taught me a very, very important lesson. There is no point in filling yourself with knowledge if you don't with information, if you don't actually know what it means and you can turn it into knowledge. So, if you don't understand why certain statistics are out there or figures and facts and what they actually mean for you, then it's going to be very hard for you to use that information and actually apply it to your personal circumstances. So just keep that in mind. Now, today's session is going to run, as I said, for about 35 to 40 minutes. The first session will go for between 5 to 10 minutes, and that is what we're going to call the information portion of today's session. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run through the top stories from the last 7 days. I'm going to give you an overview of some of those key stats and figures that have come through in the last week. And then we're going to move to the information section. So we're going to close that off. During that time, I expect you to be peppering us with all your questions in the Q&A section. For those of you that are joining us live on Zoom, if you're on Facebook, put it in the comments. And then we're going to move to the knowledge section, which is where we'll be answering all of your questions and running through all of that information that we've just gone through, breaking it down for you, understanding what it means and how you should be applying it to your personal circumstances. So, love you to be involved. You'll get the most out of this by being active, by participating. So make sure you focus, turn your phone on silent, switch off social media, focus in now and really, really maximize your time with us today. And I guarantee that you'll leave today having that extra bit of knowledge and really having involved yourself and fully understood that process. So, before we move on to section 1, as I said, it's information which is not going to get you there. It's that knowledge. So Warren Buffett says it best here in 9 words. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. I told you the story about me, as embarrassed as I was. I didn't know what I was doing. I had all of this information, but I didn't actually know what it meant and how to apply it. So just like me, and as Warren Buffett says, you need to have a system and a process to be able to process that information, turn it into knowledge, and then actually go and apply it to your personal circumstances. So at the end of today, I'm also going to highlight for those of you that have enjoyed it as to what I believe the next logical steps are and how you can really double down on understanding this concept of information versus knowledge and building your own personal database of knowledge. All right, that's it for the introduction. Let's jump into the first portion. As I said, this is the information section of today's session. So what have we seen around the country? What's been happening? Well, a lot has been happening, but these are our top stories from the week. How much does the average home buyer actually have stashed away? So do you have more, less, or the same as the average person in Australia? Buying a home, you're going to need a deposit. How much deposit do you need? And how hard is it? How many of us, either in the older generation, have heard the younger generation complaining about how easy it was for them? And if you are in that first home buyer category, you'll be well aware as to how tough it is, and be sick of hearing people saying, well, just suck it up, stop eating avocado toast, and save that money. So we'll really break down the facts and figures for you on that. First home buyers. We get a ton of questions both here on Question Time, as well as just meeting with most of you when we were able to do inspections, chatting on the phone. So we've compiled our list of the top questions, and we'll run through some of those if you don't already ask those in today's session. Apartments. It's been relatively quiet for the last 18 months, but we're finally starting to see that price gap between houses and apartments start to narrow a little bit. What does that mean, and what should you be doing about it? And then lastly, obviously, you've noticed if you've been joining us in the last few weeks that auction clearance rates have started to drop a little bit from the highs we've seen. I have explained as to whether that is a structural issue, a market issue, or whether it's just something that you can sort of take note of, but not worry about too much. So that leads me into our next thing, auction results. What did we see over the weekend? Pretty good result overall. Just over 72% was the national clearance rate. Sydney still doing fantastically. As always, obviously a much lower base, but you can see here we're in the mid 80%, which is a fantastic result. Melbourne, on the other hand, terrible result again, 55%. So does that mean Melbourne's dead? That's it, it's over. Those of you that have been paying attention, I'm sure you could answer now, and you'll know that that is not the case. So what have we seen? Well, unfortunately, Melbourne has been totally locked down in our homes, and any inspections of real estate are totally banned. Sydney, on the other hand, you are still allowed to do private inspections. So what you're seeing is people that already had listings up, had auction campaigns scheduled in Sydney, have primarily continued to have those auction campaigns and run them through. Whereas here in Melbourne, people are pulling it and not rescheduling it. And the way these statistics work is that if an auction is pulled and not rescheduled to a later date, then it's considered as a no result. And that's obviously pulling those numbers down. So I think of those numbers, I think almost half of those results that came in were pulled auctions. So, whilst that number doesn't look great, again, this is very much where I said you need to get behind that information and understand what it actually means and why it's occurring. Because on the face of it, you'd be saying Melbourne is in big trouble. It is in trouble in terms of actually getting the market continuing to go because of the way our state premier has decided to ban all inspections, as opposed to the rest of the country has allowed them to still go on a private basis. We are hoping that that's going to change. So fire in some questions if you want to know more about that, and we can run through that in the knowledge section. Okay, so what about forward-looking demand? As I always say, the auction results are a fantastic marker. They're really, really a good one to grab onto and focus and think about how things are going. But it is historical. It's a point in time. We want to know what is going to happen in the future. So, what's going to happen next week, next month, next quarter? Well, that's where this index comes into play. So this is done by realestate.com. They prepare what they call a buyer's index. And in a moment, we'll go through a renter's index as well. So basically what they do is this is the estimates in terms of what forward demand they are seeing. And they measure this by the activity that they're seeing on their website. Being the largest real estate portal in the country, it's got a ton of data. So it's a relatively good barometer as to what to expect in the future. So, when we have a look at the national one here, basically what they've done is they've set the average demand index that they saw in 2019. So well before coronavirus was even a thing. And then they've measured how it's tracking month on month, week on week, compared to that average. So that average is down here, that dotted line, if you can see it. And then you've got the line going up and down. Traditionally, we always see it drop down over the Christmas period as everyone goes on holidays. If you remember Christmas 2020, we all thought coronavirus was a thing of the past. Unfortunately, it's come back to bite us in the bum. But that's obviously why we saw as everyone's on holiday, they're not necessarily thinking about it. you can see here, it's been relatively steady when we came back. And this big bump that you've seen here is obviously what we've been seeing in those results. Typically, the lag on this is what you see now is probably delivered in transactions and results somewhere between 60 to 180 days. So 2 months to potentially 6 months as to when these people that were in high intent thinking about it actually then transact and find their properties. The biggest thing you're seeing on this graph here, we talk about it all the time, is these different coloured lines. The red line is apartments, the blue line is freestanding houses, and the black line is the average between the two of them. So you can see pretty much historically it's tracked together. As the market started to come back, I think everyone knows that house prices or freestanding homes have grown significantly faster than apartments that have obviously still been struggling from the overhang of all the students and a bit of a bashing around the head as far as rentals go. So that differential is really, really interesting, that houses have had less demand than apartments, but houses are what we're seeing selling. So I think what we're starting to see is as these house prices go up, freestanding homes start to become unaffordable, and therefore we're seeing those people start to think about apartments. We moved to our local market here in Melbourne. Similar trend, obviously a lot more choppy as we've had 6 lockdowns now. So as each of those lockdowns occur, they've obviously had an impact on the market. But you'll see the same sort of trend. Obviously, as we discussed with the auction results, big drop off here compared to the national one, where you can see a little bit of a drop, but relatively steady. And as I said, that's obviously driven by the fact that we are banned from leaving our homes and having any form of inspection. Therefore, I think you're seeing a number of people are saying, well, what is the point? If I'm not actually able to go out and see and actually transact, then there's no point in doing the window shopping. Okay, rental index, as I said, measured the same way, but this is obviously looking at rental listings and created the same way. So if we have a look at the national index, obviously, again, well up on 2019, which for those of you that maybe have an investment property and would know that it's been relatively challenging, particularly if you've been in Sydney and Melbourne over the last 18 months, would say, well, how is it up on 2019 when we had open borders, we had students, we had people in the city, we had all the casual workers, we had migration, we had everything? That's a really, really good question. And that is part of this information versus knowledge concept that I've got. Now, I think the way to explain this is that rental prices have obviously come down a fair bit. So what you're seeing is there is still a ton of activity occurring in terms of people's interest and potentially rental going on, but it's people that were perhaps paying a rent at this level, realizing that rents have dropped and moving, not necessarily more demand and new demand coming in. So whilst this is a good guide, this is a classic where this doesn't necessarily tell the full story, because anyone could tell you that the rental market was far stronger back in 2019 than it was in 2020 and 2021. So, it's a guide and it's a good indication to see. It is surprising still to see that level of demand given where things are and then the lack, I guess, of the volume of the market of potential renters. But as I said, I think we're seeing a lot more churn with people moving from one place to another, which is keeping the activity up. Very much the same sort of trend when you look at our local market here in Melbourne, Victoria, as we saw nationally. All right, that was a ton of information. Hopefully you've absorbed it, you've thought about it, and if you've already got questions, drop them in the Q&A because you'll be top of the queue. Very much I've tried to give you as much as I can now, and now we really want to move to the next section where we want to try and unpack that, understand what it means, and answer all of your questions live. So before we do, who am I? My name is James Maitland. I'm the General Manager here at Salvo. I've been doing this for more than 2 decades, and I've helped create more than 11,500 homes. So Salvo, what do we do? Well, we do a ton of different things. We've got a great number of businesses here, but ultimately what we're all about in this company is helping you create a home. So it doesn't matter where you are. I talk about the full spectrum, whether you're just looking to move out of home for the first time and renting a property, a first home buyer, right up to the other end where you might already own your own home and have 2 or 3 or 4 investment properties. Everything we do is all those different businesses, and everything we've got is all about helping you wherever you are on that scale. So don't feel like, I'm not ready to buy a home yet. I don't have a deposit. This can't help me. Well, yes, it can, because it's all about setting yourself up, planning for the future, and understanding where you are on that ladder and getting the right processes and steps involved. Same at the other end of the scale where you might say, how's this going to help me? I've already bought 3 or 4 investment properties. Well, there is still a ton of information still to be learned out there. Things are constantly changing. And I think, to get the most out of it, you need to be at the top of your game and on top of the latest thinking. And I guarantee you that if you get involved, you ask your questions, you will leave today with value, no matter where you're on that scale. All right. So who have we got on the panel today? Greg Arbeck, Jack Gian, and Lucas Karras. These guys will be answering all of your questions, and very, very excited to get stuck into throwing as much hard work as you can at them. These guys love it, and that's what today is all about. So for those of you that are joining us live on Zoom, you will have the opportunity to obviously get your questions answered live. You've got 2 methods. You can either raise your hand and we'll unmute you and you can ask your question live if you're brave enough, or you can do as most people do, Q&A section, drop it in there, and away she goes. You can obviously use the chat feature if you want. We just don't have the ability. I've got a screen here and another screen here, and I just can't monitor it all. Those of you on Facebook, drop any questions you've got in the comments, and we will circle back and answer those for you. As I said, obviously get the most out of today's experience. Those of you that are on Facebook, join us next week live on Zoom, and we'll try to get to your questions. Otherwise, we will get to them later today and answer them. All right, so that's it. Pack away section 1, the information. Introductions are done. Now is the time. I've got my sleeves rolled up. Let's get stuck into the questions. So while I have a chance to read some of the questions, I was really, really interested to sort of understand, where prices have gone and what it might do. So who can sort of give us some insight in terms of, how long does it actually take to get a deposit? What kind of deposit do you need? And perhaps put it in some finite dollars for everyone on the line now.
Yes, James. I think I've got some information here. So according to the new research, the first home buyer could take up to 15 years to save the deposit needed for their dream home in Australia. So this is obviously 15.
Sorry, Jack, you're saying 15 years.
15 years, yes.
Is the average it takes to save up. And
yes.
What are we talking? What kind of percentage deposit is that? Is that a 5%, 10%?
It's a 20%. It's a 20% of the for the deposit. And for example, let's say the Sydney, the time it would take for the average Sydney's first home buyer to save up a 20% has increased by 5 years. Now it's 14 years and 10 months since 2006. So the amount they need for the 20% of deposit is about $200,000 in Sydney.
200,000, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what about our hometown of Melbourne?
In Melbourne, so same situation in Melbourne. So the average first home buyer in Melbourne now need to take 11 years and 9 months to save up for 20% for the house, which is 4 years and 3 months longer than it would have taken in 2006. And for those they saving up for the 20% of the deposit, they need to saving $165,000 now in Melbourne.
Okay, so that's a big figure. We did see before, what sort of savings on average do people actually have? How does that compare to that figure?
Well, James, there was a recent survey done by finder.com, and your average Australian has got $32,800 in savings.
Okay, so 32,000 is the average Aussie, and Jack's just told us to buy the average house in Sydney at a 20% deposit. You're going to need 210,000. Here in Melbourne, 165,000. So I don't need to do the maths for you guys. You can tell there is a massive gap between that. So with that in mind, I think we have talked about before that if you can get on the ladder, obviously the low interest rate environment is making it one of the most affordable times to own a home in terms of your ongoing costs. But obviously you need to get on that ladder first. How can we help everyone on the line today, Jack, as to, some way to fast track that, or how might they actually get from, if they've got the average savings of 32,000, even if they've got double the average and they've got 64,000, there's still a big gap to get there. What's some advice you can give everyone as to how they can help move forward and get on that ladder and capitalize on low interest rates while they can?
Yes, James. In order to help people to cut the saving time to as early as getting the market to get on the ladder, I would like to give them the 5 tips here to help them to cutting that waiting time. So the first one is maybe considering to making the compromise or looking at different option which you can achieve a target quickly. For example, to look into the apartment in a good location rather than you look in the corner block of the family home. Or maybe you're looking outside of the desert area instead of the looking those hot spots, hot suburb. That might be, you can achieve your target quickly. The second tips is before you saving your deposit to set up a plan and a budget, and then following up the plan to deposit your money every month and treat those money as untouchable. And for example, you can have the saving account.
And how do you hide that money from if you have a wife or kids? Because I think all of you on the line here are just laughing. I've tried to make money untouchable many a time, but my daughters think I'm an ATM and it just flows out. And my wife's online shopping is out of control.
Maybe another thing can help you. Maybe you can considering some sort of like a fixed term deposit, or maybe some financial product you can earn more interest. That might help you to save those money in the account to make that untouchable. And the third tips I will give, like it's for the partner to saving, maybe you can try your best to keep one of the income as a deposit. Or for those people who will be able to have the support from their family or parents, it will be a great option to asking your dad or your mom, bank of dad and mom could help you to having a deposit much more quicker.
And we love other people's money. I think that's one of the big things we say is a great way to leverage yourself getting in. All right, what else?
The next option is for those first home buyer, they could consider in another way. For example, the lender's mortgage insurance, which can cover the difference between the actually deposit and the required 20%. That's another probably you can considering. The last tips I would like to give is for the first home buyer, they will be able to get some help from the government, like the first home loan deposit scheme. It could help buyers to get a loan with a deposit as low as 5% compared with the normal 20%. This will be efficiently cut the deposit saving time to a quarter of what it would normally takes.
So, simple maths, we said in Melbourne, you needed 165,000. So divide that by 4, you're at just over 40,000. The average of 32,000, you're almost there if you're able to access that. I imagine that scheme probably isn't eligible at the level of the median house price in Melbourne. You've probably got to buy something cheaper, but I think that's definitely one of those ones where if you don't have mum and dad to lend you money, there is no better source. I don't think there is anyone in this country who doesn't think that the government doesn't do a good job. So you might as well take the money off them and use it for yourselves, because we're all going to pay enough tax over our lifetime. So, if you are a first home buyer, that is one of the best things you can possibly do is leverage those taxes that perhaps you haven't paid yet, but you will be paying over the next few decades to really help yourself get in there. All right, so that was good. So, we talked about compromise. I mentioned at the start of today's session where we were looking at that gap that we're starting to see, in terms of the demand for apartments versus freestanding houses. Prices, I think it'd be fair to say that all of the noise over the last 6-10 months has all been about freestanding homes, but apartments are slowly starting to come back.
Absolutely, James. We've been talking about this for a while. That the differentiation between apartments and houses, it was getting larger and larger and larger. And sometimes people go and sort of making the so-called compromise of going out to what we would deem as whoop whoop. People are actually looking at apartments, and from our discussions, we've actually seen the actual figures are showing that the gap between houses and apartments is narrowing. So that can lead, if you're a smart investor, so firstly, if you're a first homeowner, instead of compromising, buy something in an apartment building in a good location. If you're an investor, it's an incredibly good time to get in now, because we foresee, and I very much believe we will see some good capital growth as the differentiation between the houses and the apartments get closer and closer. We'll see some good growth in apartments.
Okay, so for those of you that weren't quite sure, what Greg's talking about is obviously, not so much he's talking about the price point, as in apartments are going to start coming to that median price of, what was it, Jack? 800,000-900,000 here in Melbourne.
Yeah.
So not so much that. What he's talking about is the actual growth rate. So, we've seen, as we talked about before, that houses have sort of been going, freestanding houses like this, and apartments sort of, just steadily going, but nowhere near the same. We're starting to see that tick up. And I guess there's more, for those of you that, perhaps thinking about value, I guess what you're saying, Greg, is that apartments haven't had their run yet. They're still at the starting line. Yep. And they're about to hit the home straight soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the borders will reopen. Okay, right now it feels like it's never going to happen, but that will happen. So it's a good time now to get in the apartment, because the people that will be coming in will be wanting to rent. That'll mean you'll start getting better rentals. It'll mean more investors buying into apartments, which will then push the prices. So it's a good time to get in now, while the pricing is slowly increasing.
Yeah. Okay. And then obviously the most obvious one is that, a 2-bedroom apartment typically is going to be, a fraction of the price of a 2-bedroom freestanding home, but not necessarily smaller. And arguably, I guess, Greg, we talk about it all the time that, having a home, creating a home is about creating a life, a lifestyle, and, your own health and happiness and mental health, is our favorite topic everyone talks about at the time. And having everything that you want and you can enjoy is what is important. And typically you can stay in those areas that are great with an apartment that you may not be able to afford a freestanding home.
Absolutely. So I think that's why maybe not a compromise. I think apartments are a very good option.
So Greg, instead of spending $50 million on that Toorak mansion, you could just spend $600,000 and get a nice apartment. And you could have a bit of spare change left over.
Absolutely. And then see some good growth. I really believe there's going to be some good growth in apartments over the next 5 to 10 years.
Good. Gary, I hope that answered your question. I just added a bit more there. If it didn't, just drop something in there as well. All right. So, I guess for a lot of people might be saying, all right, it's spring. We've always talked about that spring is a busier time in terms of transaction volumes, but it's a very, very different year again, much like last year. We've got New South Wales shut down. We've got Victoria shut down. What are we actually sort of seeing? Where are listings sitting? And I guess, it's clear we've got nowhere near the volume of listings we're expecting. Why is that the case? And what do we actually expect is going to transpire over the next couple of months?
Yes, James, I think you mentioned just in the beginning that the volume is dramatically dropped. Even within the last week, the clearance rate in Sydney was still good. It's 84, I think it's 84%, but we're only saying that in Sydney, there are only 519 auction listing compared with before the lockdown, we very normal to saying the 1,000 plus the listing auction. But
I think it was a super Saturday in Sydney and Melbourne, which is that more than 1,000 pretty much week after week after week after week. And I guess that's typically what we expect in a spring period, isn't it? To be seeing those 1,000 plus weekends consistently over this sort of 10-week period.
Yes. I think it's another things we need to think about is because the Sydney is different with Melbourne. In Sydney, we still allow the private inspection, but in Melbourne, I think it is even worse. I think for the like you mentioned, like the more than half, about I think it's 54% of the listing has been put and not yet to reschedule because we have the lockdown and the private inspection in our hometown is not even allowed.
Yeah. Okay. And perhaps for those of you that are wondering, can we just go around the panel and all of the vendors that you guys have got on any of the property listings you've got? I mean, what's your advice to them if they had an auction? I mean, I know the listings that I had, you know, I sort of said to everyone, just pull it and wait and see. What advice have you been giving to your vendors, Greg?
Pull it, definitely.
Lucas?
Exactly the same. Just wait.
Jack?
Yes, I think it's also for the vendors, they don't have the confidence now to listen to the property without the inspection. They don't have the confidence to sell the property now. I think after the next week, if we can confirm after the 23rd of the September, we'll be allowed to do the one-on-one inspection. And I think it's the market will be more active. I think it will be more listing will be topped up because I've been spoken to them, lots of the vendor, they will say, okay, let's hold on and looking after the 23rd of September if we are be allowed out of the inspection. Yeah.
All right, good. Now, we've talked about a lot. You know, first home buyers have obviously been very active. And I know that a large percentage of you on the line today have dropped in the chat and the Q&A that you're first home buyers. So Lucas and I were chatting about this over the last few weeks, and I think you've compiled a list of the top questions that you get asked by home buyers. As much as I know you would love to spend the next 45 minutes running through them all, perhaps just if you can rattle off the list of, you know, the top, 15, 20, 25 questions you get asked, and then maybe pick the top 3 to sort of share with everyone. And those of you that are interested and want to know more, obviously drop it in the Q&A with your details and we'll get back to you, or just drop it as an email and we'll feel free to let us know, and we'll obviously give you more information on those. So Lucas, we'll try and keep you to less than 45 minutes, please.
Oh, it's going to be tough. Okay. So, look, one of the biggest questions I think people ask is, do I buy or sell first? Okay, so I will go into that in a little bit more detail. Another good question is, what's a good property to buy? What properties should I avoid? Buying off the plan. Should I buy house and land? How much deposit do I need? What is pre-approval? Is a quoted price accurate? What can I do to make sure the price quoted is fair? How do I buy at auction? Can I make an offer before auction, and how? Can I negotiate on settlement and deposit size? Do I buy now or wait? And the last one, will the market dive? So
Seems a little bit dramatic, that last one. Will the market die? It sounds like a press conference talking about all the deaths.
I will answer that because it's very simple. But first of all, let's see the most common question that people have: do I buy or do I sell? What do I do first? And this one is quite a tricky one because it depends on people's circumstances. But I'll give you some sort of, we'll break it down a bit. So first of all, it makes sense to sell first because then you know the financial position you're in before you decide to purchase your next home. So you know how much money you have in the kitty to spend. Second of all, if you do decide to sell before you buy, try to get at least a 3 to 6 month settlement period, because when there's not much stock in the market like currently, it will take you longer to find that perfect property that you're looking for. Third, if the market is slow, definitely sell first. Now, and the fourth one is, in the current market we are now, many people decide to buy first and not pay extra by doing it later, because it's such a good market right now that the prices just change every week. So, you need to, if you do buy first and then sell later, just make sure you have a very good idea what your property is worth, because then you sort of have an idea how much money you should spend, because you don't want to be stuck later and need a bridging loan in order to have 2 loans to pay off. But it ultimately depends to how much savings one may have available. So, but like I said, right now with the market we're in, a lot of people are deciding to buy first and sell later.
Okay, so I'm not sure as to what we're telling people, because it was you should sell first, buy, or buy first. But I guess what you're saying is that, you know, like anything, you've got to understand your own circumstances, where you sit, you know, how it affects your family, I guess, and really weigh that up. Because I guess as you said, the logic, and a lot of people are saying buy first, so that you know, you're making sure that you're buying and then selling into the rising market. On the flip side, you know, if your property isn't worth as much as you thought, or you've overextended yourself, you could end up in a real jam. And hence why me personally, I don't like added pressure. So I like to compartmentalize things. So, you know, typically I would follow Lucas's initial train, which is sell first, square everything up, know what you've got, and then move forward. But, you know, that's not always the right decision to do. And I guess it just depends as to how you personally feel and your own circumstances.
I think the number two thing is depends how much money you got and the current market situation whenever you decide to do that. So now the next biggest question people ask is, what's a good property to buy? Don't we all want to know what is a good property to buy?
I think we do a session on that goes for about 90 minutes. And
yeah, but let me just cut it down. Okay, there's a few things you should look at when you're buying a property. So first of all, buy a property that's strategically located. Okay, so location. Buy a property that's close to amenities, or if you buy an apartment, make sure that there are good amenities within the building. Buy a property that has good growth prospects. Make sure there are lots of infrastructure in place, because that normally means the future growth is very good for the property. Buy into a family-friendly area. And finally, for some people that drive, obviously when you buy a property, make sure there's an option to buy a car space as well. Because again, when it comes to apartment, a lot of developers these days don't have any car spaces, especially if you buy a 1 or 2 bedroom, they say, sorry, it's only for the penthouses or the 3 bedroom. So it's very important to look into that. Don't assume it comes with a car space.
Okay, good. All right, I'll let you give one more.
Since you made the comment, okay, I'll add 2 quick ones. First of all, do I buy now or wait? The answer, there's only one answer here, and it's buy now. The median prices is never going to go back to $120,000 or even back to $700,000. You must focus on the future. Ideally, you would have purchased 12 months ago. Ultimately, it doesn't matter when you get into the market, as long as you hold the property for 5 to 10 years at least. And finally, to get put James's mind at ease, will the market dive? Oh my God, I've been doing this for 20 years. Every year I hear people telling me there's a crash coming within the first 12 months. It hasn't happened yet. Okay, it's very unlikely. Residential property is always the best performing asset with the least amount of risk. And if anything does go wrong straight away, and we've seen that recently, the government will step up if the market is suffering. The fundamentals such as interest rates, economy, employment, they're rightfully positive. So especially what they say, the experts say, as long as you buy investment grade properties, you would always do well over time.
All right, good. Joanne, Barbara, Brian, everyone else, I can see a lot of people were jumping in, Lucas, on some of your other questions. So if you have put it in there, we will get back to you after today's session. Just conscious we've already gone 10 minutes over time. And I just want to close up where we are and really identify for you what I think is the next step. So thanks, guys. It was a good session. And let's just close out with a few thoughts moving forward. So, today's been really good. As I said, we ran through the information portion. We've gone through the knowledge part. And for all of you that were active and participated and got involved with your questions, thank you. Hopefully we helped you. You got a better understanding about, where things are and what it means for you. And hopefully that concept about actionable knowledge. So what do you do from here? Well, let me tell you, about 95% of you are going to do nothing. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you are looking to move forward, or you want to actually achieve something you've been trying, whether it's buying that first home, moving to a next home, getting your first investment property, whatever it might be, I just want to propose this to you. If you don't make a change, then don't expect a different result. So, whilst that is the easiest thing, and I guarantee you that is what 95% of you on the line today will do, is do nothing with this. That's not the way to move forward. So, what I hope you do as a bare minimum is take on board what we've discussed today, have a think about that concept of actionable knowledge, think about some of the things that boys discussed, like compromise, using other people's money to help you move forward, and really, really go out there, make those changes yourself, push forward and achieve whatever it is that you're trying to do in terms of creating a home. For some of you, that'll work well. But much as I said, most of you will do nothing. For most of you, you need a little bit of a push, you need some guidance, and you really want to fast forward that track. So what I suggest is, and what I dearly recommend is the best thing, is to do it with us. Now, how do you do that? Well, as I said, we have a ton of different businesses, all centered around helping you create a home. So it really depends where you are on that journey as to what the best business that we've got and the best next logical step for you is. However, what I can tell you is I've thought long and hard about this, and everyone wants to have a minimal amount of time commitment and says, look, I'm busy, I'm not sure, what are you trying to sell me? So what I've done here is I've really thought long and hard about it, and I believe that the best thing you can possibly do is commit the next 15 or 20 minutes sometime over the next week to have a one-on-one discussion with one of the guys, run through where you're sitting and really work out what are the goals you're trying to achieve. And then we can work out if we can be the right fit for you. So, who's this going to apply to? Because it is not going to be for everyone on the line. I've got to be upfront and honest with you guys. I'd rather tell you now, if this isn't you, then probably we can't help you. So who is it going to work for? Well, you've got to be motivated. You've got to be confident and prepared to take action and move forward. Those of you that want to procrastinate, it's probably not going to work, because we do want to push you. We do want to see you achieve those goals. You've got to understand, as we've been talking about, how to turn that information into knowledge. Lucas said it, prices are not going backwards. So you need to focus on today and what you're going to do in the future. And ultimately, you've got to be prepared to obviously do the work, as I said. Take those actions, roll up your sleeves. We will give you the guidance, we'll help you on that path, but you've got to be prepared to take the action yourself. So if that does sound like you, as I said, the way that I believe we can best help you is I'm only asking for you to commit 15 to 20 minutes sometime in the next week for a one-on-one catch up. We obviously can't do that in person. So whether it's over the phone, FaceTime, Zoom, WhatsApp, whatever you prefer, to catch up with one of the guys, have a run through where you're currently sitting and what it is that you're hoping to achieve. And then we can really understand what it is. We can give you a bit more understanding as to how we might be able to assist you on that journey. As you know, the people that achieve and are smashing through their goals are the ones that are actually getting help to fast forward through that process and achieve that. So, this, I believe, is the smallest possible commitment you can make and still expect and have the expectation of getting a realistic outcome to move forward. So if that sounds like you, how do you do it? Well, it's really, really simple. There's 3 ways. If you're with us on Zoom, jump into the chat. There should be a link there. You can click through and book your appointment time. Those of you, again, that are on Zoom, your web browser should have redirected you to that booking page. So jump on there and choose your time. And lastly, if you're busy at the moment, or you're not sure, or you want to check with your family or friends that might want to join you, then I will send you an email with a link that you can do that later. But don't delay, don't think about it too much, because these do book out. And as we always say, later equals never. So today, while you're pumped, while you're excited, while you felt you got value out of this, don't be part of that 95% that will do nothing. Be part of that 5% that are going to be proactive. They're going to take the action and do the next step. So before you go, I want to tell you a little story about myself. As I said at the start of today's show, I've been highly embarrassed. This is a picture of a holiday I went, thankfully, in July. I managed to get away to Hamilton Island for a few nights. It was a great holiday with the family. We had a fantastic time, albeit that was somewhere between, I think, lockdown 4. When we landed, we went out into lockdown number 5. But it was great to get away. Now, when we're up there, I think it was the second night, and my eldest daughter, Isabella, who you can see here, she said to me, "Dad, I'd love to walk to the top of that mountain and watch the sunrise." She's right into TikTok, so I know she wanted to do something and put it on TikTok. But I thought that sounds like a great idea. I'd love to do that with you. I said, "Of course, no worries." So that night, as we went to bed, jumped onto my phone, opened up the internet, had a look as to what time the sun was going to rise that morning. To my surprise, it was at about 4:45 a.m. Now, most of you will know that one of the joys of being on holiday is not having to set an alarm, not having to get up early, being able to sleep in. So I was about to say to her, "You know what, Isabella, can we do it another time? I don't want to do it." But I thought, no, set the alarm. I set myself about 4 or 5 alarms and went to sleep. What felt like 30 minutes later, the noise of that alarm. We all know how annoying it is on the iPhone. You hear that thing and all you want to do is throw the phone away. So what did I do? I did what most of you always do. Instead of taking that action, I pressed the big button snooze and put it away. It's so easy. Apple make it easy for you to do that, and I rolled over. Went off again and I hit stop. I'm not getting up. About 30 seconds later, I realized, you know what? She's really, really excited about it. What are you doing? Just get up and do it. It's not that much effort. So what did I do? Jumped up, got changed. We ran to the top of the mountain. We took this photo. It was fantastic. It was a great experience. It's something that I know she'll always remember. She still talks about it now, months and months later. I had a great time, and it really, really was a great memory that we'll enjoy forever. So why am I telling you this? Well, I took that step instead of sitting there and thinking about it, procrastinating and not doing it. I moved forward. I didn't hit the snooze button. I jumped up, I got out of bed, and I had a great experience. As I said, something I'll always enjoy. So much like me, I don't want you to sit here, be passive, think I'll do it later, because as I said, later equals never. Don't hit the snooze button, jump on, book one of those appointments, because I guarantee you'll get value out of it. And it's those people that are prepared to actually move forward, take that action, that are going to get the benefits, that are going to get the memories like this, that are going to create the home that they've been dreaming of. They're going to move forward, create that financial security for their family. So if you take anything out of today, don't hit the snooze button, get up, jump out of bed in the mornings, move forward, take those next steps in your life. And really, really, I guarantee you, if you commit the next 15 minutes sometime over the next week, that you will get value and we can help you on that journey. All right, that's it. I know we've gone a bit over time, so thank you very much for everyone that's still hung around. I know there was a lot. Hopefully you got value out of it. Those of you that were active and participated, I really, really appreciate your commitment. Those of you that are long-time followers, I've seen a lot of familiar names on Zoom today. Thank you very much for your continued support. You are why we do this. We love doing it. The guys had a lot of fun, and hopefully we will see all of you either next week, next month, or next quarter. As always, we do this every single Wednesday at 2:30, so feel free to join us whenever you can. And I look forward to seeing all of you, hopefully, face-to-face at some point in the future.